The Crimson Fleet's perfect record. The weight of victory. Commander Krex of the Vorthek Empire stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Bloodfang, watching another world burn beneath his feet. The planet Zephyria Prime had resisted for exactly 14 hours before their defenses crumbled like sandcastles before a tsunami. It was always the same story. The proud species would make their desperate last stands, fire their primitive weapons, and then accept the inevitable reality of Vorthek superiority. Krex's forearms moved with practiced efficiency across the command console, his chitinous exoskeleton reflecting the orange glow of the dying planet below. His compound eyes, evolved for perfect predatory vision, tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. Another victory to add to his perfect record. 847 consecutive conquests without a single defeat. Resistance has ended. Commander, reported Sub-Commander Vex, her mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Their capital city has surrendered. Estimated resource extraction can begin within the next solar cycle. The Vorthek Empire had perfected the art of conquest over 3 millennia. Their strategy never varied because it never needed to. Arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate absolute superiority, crush any resistance, and begin the systematic harvesting of resources and population. They had consumed entire star clusters using this method. The next target. Krex turned to the stellar cartography display, where dozens of red markers indicated conquered worlds, and a handful of yellow markers showed targets under consideration. His attention focused on a small, unremarkable system at the edge of explored space, a single yellow star with several rocky planets, including one that showed signs of recent colonization. "What intelligence do we have on this system?" Krex asked, pointing a taloned finger at the display. Vex manipulated the controls, bringing up detailed scans. "The inhabitants call themselves humans, Commander. They appear to be a relatively young spacefaring species. This particular world, designated Kepler 442 bits, houses approximately 50,000 colonists. They've established basic infrastructure for agriculture and mineral extraction." The holographic display showed a peaceful world with sprawling farms, small cities, and gentle rolling hills covered in Earth-imported vegetation. It looked almost idyllic, which made it perfect for Vorthek purposes. Peaceful worlds always had the best resources and the most compliant populations. Military capabilities. Krex inquired, though he already knew the answer would be negligible. Minimal, Commander. Basic orbital defense platforms, no significant naval presence. Their technology appears to be at least 2 centuries behind our own. Intelligence suggests their homeworld is heavily fragmented into competing nation-states, which has limited their expansion capabilities. Krex nodded approvingly. Divided species were always easier to conquer. Unity required strength, and strength required wisdom that few species possessed. Estimated resistance duration. 6 to 8 hours at maximum, Commander. Possibly less if we target their communication infrastructure first. The approach. The Crimson Fleet moved through hyperspace with the confidence of apex predators approaching their prey. 57 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts and the flagship Bloodfang, emerged from their spatial fold just beyond the edge of the Kepler system. Their arrival sent gravitational waves rippling through space, announcing their presence to any civilization advanced enough to detect such disturbances. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, Krex watched the tactical display update as their sensors mapped the human colony. The settlement was even more defenseless than their intelligence had suggested. A few orbital platforms that barely qualified as weapons, several cargo vessels that couldn't outrun a Vorthek shuttle, and what appeared to be a single military installation that might have been impressive to a Stone Age civilization. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the human colony," reported Communications Officer Zelt. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the human face. The creature had the typical mammalian features Krex had observed in previous encounters with such species. Soft skin, bilateral symmetry, and those peculiar optical organs that seemed to convey emotion. The human appeared to be female, though Krex found it difficult to distinguish between their subspecies. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Kepler 442 Bits Colonial Authority," the human said, her voice steady despite the obvious fear Krex could detect in her biosignatures. "You are approaching sovereign human territory. Please state your intentions." Krex activated the translation matrix and stepped forward. "I am Commander Krex of the Vorthak Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. Surrender immediately, and your population will be processed according to standard protocols. Resist, and you will be eliminated." The human's expression changed in a way that Krex's xenobiological training had taught him to recognize as defiance. It was always amusing to watch lesser species attempt to project strength when faced with inevitable defeat. "We will not surrender," Captain Chen replied. "This world is under the protection of the United Earth Alliance. Any hostile action against our colony will be considered an act of war." Krex's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Your homeworld is dozens of light years away, Captain. Even if they possessed the capability to respond, which our intelligence suggests they do not, help would arrive far too late to matter." The first strike. The attack began exactly as planned. Vorthak plasma cannons, capable of melting through meters of reinforced titanium, targeted the orbital defense platforms first. The human weapons fired back with admirable determination, but their projectile-based systems might as well have been throwing rocks at a mountain. Within 30 minutes, every orbital defense had been neutralized. The Crimson Fleet moved into close planetary orbit, their massive shadows darkening the skies above the human settlements. "Begin ground bombardment of military targets," Krex commanded. "Standard intimidation pattern. I want them to understand the futility of resistance." Crimson beams lanced down from orbit, turning the colonial military headquarters into a crater of molten glass. The humans' communication array vanished in a pillar of superheated plasma. One by one, every symbol of resistance was methodically eliminated, but something unexpected happened. Instead of surrendering, the human settlements began coordinating their defenses. Civilian infrastructure was rapidly converted into makeshift bunkers. Agricultural equipment was weaponized. Most surprisingly, the humans began evacuating their population not to surrender points, but to defensive positions. "Commander," Vex reported, confusion evident in her voice, "they're not following standard capitulation protocols. They appear to be preparing for extended resistance." Krex studied the tactical display. In 847 previous conquests, once orbital superiority was established and primary military targets eliminated, surrender followed within hours, sometimes minutes, yet these humans seemed to be digging in for a prolonged conflict. The impossible message. The surface bombardment continued for 6 hours. Every strategic target had been eliminated, yet the humans continued to resist. Small groups of fighters emerged from hidden positions to attack Vorthak landing parties before disappearing back into concealed bunkers. It was tactically insignificant but strategically puzzling. Then came the transmission that changed everything. "Commander, we're detecting a high-energy burst from the surface," reported the sensor operator. "It appears to be a focused transmission directed toward the human homeworld." Krex's compound eyes focused sharply on the display. "Impossible. We destroyed their communication infrastructure hours ago. The signal appears to be originating from the agricultural sector, sir. They may have concealed backup transmitters within civilian infrastructure." On the surface of Kepler 442 bits, Captain Sarah Chen crouched in the ruins of what had once been a farming community center. Around her, the 23 surviving members of the Colonial Defense Force worked frantically to maintain the hidden quantum entanglement communicator that connected them to Earth. The device had been disguised as irrigation control equipment, a deception that had saved their lives. "Emergency transmission to Earth Defense Command." Chen spoke into the device, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, Kepler 442 Bits Colonial Authority. We are under attack by an alien force calling themselves the Vorthok Empire. They possess overwhelming technological superiority. Our defenses have been neutralized." She paused, listening to plasma fire in the distance. The enemy fleet consists of approximately 57 vessels. They appear to be following a standard conquest protocol. Based on their statements, they have done this before. Many times. Chen looked around at her surviving people. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, and scientists who had come to this world to build something beautiful. Now they crouched in darkness, facing annihilation from creatures they had never imagined. "We cannot hold out much longer," she continued. "But we're uploading everything we've learned about their technology, their tactics, and their psychology. They think humans are just another primitive species to be conquered. They're wrong." She activated the final protocol, transmitting terabytes of combat data, tactical observations, and biological scans of the attackers. "Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them that we stood our ground. Tell them that humanity will not go quietly into the dark." The transmission ended just as Vorthok shock troops breached the building's defenses. The pack bond. In the command center of the Bloodfang, Krex reviewed the day's operations with growing frustration. The human colony had finally fallen after 18 hours of resistance, far longer than any previous conquest. But it wasn't the duration that troubled him. It was the behavior. Analysis of human combat patterns shows several anomalies, reported Science Officer Thek. They consistently prioritize the survival of non-combatants over tactical advantage. They shared resources even when doing so compromised their own survival. Most notably, they continued fighting even when victory was impossible. Krex studied the behavioral data. Elaborate on this last point. In every previous conquest, Commander, once a species recognizes that defeat is inevitable, they attempt to negotiate terms or surrender to preserve their population. These humans continued active resistance, even after their communication with their homeworld was established. They had to know that help could not arrive in time. Perhaps they believed their message would somehow alter the tactical situation. Negative, Commander. Analysis of the transmission content shows they understood it was essentially a final message. They fought not to win, but to ensure their homeworld would be warned. Krex's exoskeleton clicked as he shifted position. This was indeed anomalous behavior. Self-preservation was the most fundamental instinct of intelligent life. Yet these humans had chosen certain death over probable survival through surrender. "There's something else, Commander," Thek continued. "We've analyzed the genetic and social structure of this colony. These humans were not related by blood or tribal affiliation. They came from different regions of their homeworld, different cultural groups, even different belief systems. Yet they fought and died for each other, as if they were genetically related." Explain. "It appears humans have evolved a psychological trait they call pack bonding. They form intense emotional attachments to individuals and groups outside their immediate genetic family. This colony had been together for only 3 standard years, yet they exhibited loyalty patterns typically seen only in species with shared genetic heritage." Krex considered this information carefully. Pack bonding with genetic relatives was common throughout the galaxy, but forming such bonds with strangers, across species lines, across ideological differences, that was unprecedented. What are the implications for conquest of their homeworld? Thek's mandibles clicked nervously. "If this behavior is consistent across their species, Commander, they may prove significantly more difficult to subjugate than our models predict. A species that bonds across genetic and cultural lines could potentially unify in ways we haven't encountered before." Krex dismissed the concern with a wave of his primary arm. 50,000 farmers and scientists resisted for 18 hours. Their homeworld may have billions, but they also have the disadvantage of being divided into competing nations. We will proceed as planned. But as the Crimson Fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, heading toward the blue world the humans called Earth, Krex couldn't shake the memory of Captain Sarah Chen's final words. There had been something in her voice, something beyond defiance or desperation. It was a certainty that chilled him to his chitinous core. She had spoken as if defeat was impossible, even as her world burned around her. As if humanity possessed some quality that transcended military technology or tactical superiority. As if the pact bond these humans formed was something the Vorthak Empire had never encountered before, and something they would never understand until it was too late. The Crimson Fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the seeds of their own destruction, encoded in a simple message about creatures who refuse to abandon each other, even in the face of certain death. The pack awakens. The message received. Admiral Marcus Torres stood in the war room of the United Earth Alliance headquarters, staring at the holographic display that showed the final transmission from Kepler 442 bits. Around him, the greatest military minds from every nation on Earth had gathered in unprecedented unity. Chinese admirals stood beside American generals. Russian cosmonauts worked alongside Indian astrophysicists, and African engineers collaborated with European strategists. The message from Captain Sarah Chen had changed everything. For the first time in human history, the squabbling nations of Earth faced a threat that made their petty territorial disputes seem absurd. An alien empire that had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds was coming for them, and they had perhaps months to prepare. Analysis of the enemy vessels is complete, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenotechnology specialist, hastily recruited from the Mars research stations. Their technology is indeed superior to ours in most areas. Their plasma weapons, shielding systems, and propulsion exceed our capabilities by several centuries. General Liu Wei, the head of China's Space Defense Force, leaned forward. Then we cannot win through direct confrontation. Not using conventional tactics, Torres agreed. But Captain Chen's sacrifice gave us something invaluable. She showed us that these Vorthak expect compliance, not creativity. They've conquered 800 worlds using the same strategy because it's always worked. Dr. Vasquez activated another section of the display. The behavioral analysis is equally important. The Vorthak appear to be a rigid hierarchical species with limited adaptability. They follow established protocols precisely, which makes them predictable. Predictable enemies can be defeated, added Colonel Sarah Kim, Torres's strategic advisor. But we need to be smart about this. We can't outmuscle them, but maybe we can outthink them. Torres nodded, his weathered face grim but determined. The emergency defense protocols have been activated. Every space-capable vessel is being retrofitted with the best weapons we can manufacture. Every asteroid mining station is being converted into a fortress. Every satellite is being equipped with defensive systems. But even as he spoke, Torres knew it wouldn't be enough. Earth's total military space fleet consisted of perhaps 200 vessels, most of them designed for exploration or cargo transport. Against 57 dedicated warships with superior technology, they would last perhaps an hour in direct combat. The innovation response. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in the most secure research facility on Earth, Dr. James Crawford worked alongside a team of the planet's brightest scientists on humanity's last hope. The quantum entanglement communicator that had transmitted Chen's final message had given them an idea that bordered on insanity. The theory is sound, Crawford explained to the assembled team, his hands shaking from exhaustion and caffeine. If we can create a stable quantum entanglement field around a vessel, we can essentially make it exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the quantum physicist who had helped develop the original communicator, frowned at the equations covering the wall-sized display. But the power requirements would be enormous, and the field collapse could tear apart anything inside it. Which is why we're not planning to use it on a traditional vessel, Crawford replied. He activated a new section of the display, showing a sleek, angular ship design unlike anything in Earth's current fleet. The Nexus drive requires a completely new approach to ship construction. The vessel itself becomes part of the quantum field. The design was revolutionary. Instead of armor plating, the ship would use quantum-shifted matter that could exist in multiple states. Instead of traditional engines, It would manipulate probability itself to move through space. Instead of conventional weapons, it would fire coherent quantum disruption beams that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. "It's brilliant," whispered Dr. Vasquez, "and completely untested. We don't have time for extensive testing." Torres interrupted, entering the laboratory with Colonel Kim. "Long-range sensors have detected gravitational anomalies at the edge of the solar system. The Vorthek fleet will be here within weeks." Crawford looked up from his calculations. "The prototype is nearly complete, but we can only build one. The quantum crystalline matrix required for the Nexus drive depleted our entire supply of synthesized exotic matter." "One ship against 57, Torres mused. "Those are terrible odds." "Not for humans," Kim replied quietly. Captain Chen held out for 18 hours, with nothing but determination and a few improvised weapons. What could we do with a ship that defies the laws of physics? The enemy arrives. The Vorthek Crimson Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system with their usual precision. Commander Krex studied the tactical display, noting the positions of human vessels scattered throughout the system. It was exactly what he had expected from a divided species. Their forces were spread thin, trying to protect multiple worlds and installations instead of concentrating their defense. "Human military assets detected," reported Sub-Commander Vex. "Approximately 200 vessels of various classifications. Estimated engagement time, 47 minutes for complete neutralization." Krex nodded approvingly. "Begin standard approach. Target their outer system defenses first, then move inward toward their homeworld. I want them to see their defeat approaching slowly." The Crimson Fleet moved into formation, their massive dreadnoughts leading the advance, while smaller vessels spread out to envelope any potential escape routes. It was a pattern they had executed hundreds of times, as precise and inexorable as gravity itself. But as they approached Jupiter's orbit, something unexpected happened. The scattered human vessels didn't flee or attempt to form a defensive line. Instead, they began moving in seemingly random directions, some diving toward the gas giant, others accelerating toward the asteroid belt, still others heading for the outer planets. "Curious tactical deployment," Vex observed. "They appear to be hiding." "Standard cowardice," Krex replied dismissively. "They hope to avoid engagement by dispersing their forces. It will only delay the inevitable." What Krex didn't understand was that the human vessels weren't hiding. They were positioning themselves according to a carefully coordinated plan that Captain Chen's sacrifice had made possible. Every ship, from the smallest mining vessel to the largest military cruiser, carried a quantum entanglement communicator that linked them to the prototype vessel hidden within Earth's moon. The Nexus awakens. Commander Sarah Chen awakened in the pilot's chair of the UEA Nexus, her body still adjusting to the quantum field that surrounded the ship. She was the younger sister of the captain, Sarah Chen, who had died on Kepler 442 bits, and she had volunteered for this mission knowing it would likely be her last. The Nexus existed in a state that defied conventional understanding. Parts of the ship flickered in and out of visible reality, while others seemed to exist in multiple positions simultaneously. The quantum field that powered it required a pilot whose consciousness could somehow navigate between probability states, a skill that only a handful of humans seemed to possess. "Nexus to Earth Command," Chen transmitted through the quantum link. "All systems are functioning within acceptable parameters. Beginning engagement protocol." On Earth, Admiral Torres watched the tactical display with a mixture of hope and terror. The Vorthek fleet was approaching Mars, systematically destroying the mining stations and defensive platforms that humanity had hastily constructed. Human casualties were mounting, but every lost position sent valuable tactical data to the Nexus. "Vorthek fleet is maintaining standard formation," reported Colonel Kim. "They're not adapting to our dispersal tactics." "Because they don't need to," Torres replied grimly. "They're winning." He activated the quantum communicator. "Nexus, you are cleared for engagement. Remember, we only get one shot at this." In the quantum-shifted cockpit of the Nexus, Commander Chen smiled with the same expression her sister had worn in her final moments. Understood, Command. Beginning probability shift. The impossible battle. The Nexus appeared in the center of the Vorthak formation, without any detectable approach vector. One moment the space between their ships was empty. The next moment a sleek human vessel was firing weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Commander Krex stared at the tactical display in shock as two of his dreadnoughts simply stopped existing. The quantum disruption beams had unmade them at the molecular level, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of component atoms. Return fire, Krex commanded, but the human vessel flickered and shifted between dimensions. Plasma beams passed harmlessly through space it had occupied microseconds before. The Nexus reappeared above the Vorthak flagship, firing downward with devastating precision. The Bloodfang shields absorbed some of the quantum energy, but sections of the ship's hull began dissolving as probability waves destabilized the molecular bonds of its armor. How is this possible? Vex demanded, her compound eyes tracking the impossible movements of the human vessel. But Krex was beginning to understand. The humans hadn't just built a superior weapon. They had created something that operated outside the established laws of warfare. Just as their pack bonding behavior had defied xenobiological models, their technology now defied physics itself. The battle became a deadly dance between the predictable and the impossible. The Vorthak fleet, with their superior numbers and firepower, should have overwhelmed any opponent. But the Nexus existed in multiple probability states simultaneously, making conventional targeting impossible while delivering attacks that bypassed every known defensive system. The pack strikes. As the Nexus engaged the main Vorthak fleet, the scattered human vessels throughout the solar system began their coordinated counterattack. Mining ships emerged from behind asteroids to launch improvised kinetic projectiles. Research vessels used their sensor arrays to jam Vorthak communications. Even civilian transports contributed by creating false signatures that confused enemy targeting systems. It wasn't the individual attacks that mattered. Each human vessel was hopelessly outmatched by any Vorthak warship. But together, they created a web of confusion and misdirection that allowed the Nexus to operate with maximum effectiveness. Commander Chen felt the quantum field respond to her intentions as she guided the ship through probability space. She could sense the determination of every human pilot in the system, their willingness to sacrifice themselves to protect Earth. It was the same pack-bonding instinct that had driven her sister to fight to the end on Kepler 442 bits, now amplified across an entire star system. The Nexus emerged from a probability shift directly alongside another Vorthak dreadnought. Chen triggered the quantum cannon at point-blank range, and the massive alien vessel simply ceased to exist. The realization. Commander Krex watched his perfect fleet being systematically dismantled by a single human vessel and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death, which was simply an occupational hazard, but fear of the unknown. The humans were doing something that should have been impossible. They were fighting as if they were a single organism with multiple bodies. Every vessel in their fleet seemed to know exactly where every other vessel was positioned. They anticipated Vorthak movements with uncanny precision. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation to create opportunities for others. "Commander," Thek reported, his voice filled with something approaching awe. "I'm detecting quantum entanglement signatures linking every human vessel in the system. They're not just communicating instantaneously. They're thinking together." Krex understood at last what made humans dangerous. It wasn't their technology, though their Nexus drive was revolutionary. It wasn't their individual courage, though that was considerable. It was their ability to become something greater than the sum of their parts through their pack-bonding instinct. The Vorthak Empire conquered through overwhelming individual superiority, but humans had evolved a different kind of strength. They became stronger together, not despite their differences, but because of them. The final gambit. As the battle raged around Earth's moon, Commander Chen made a decision that would echo through galactic history. The Nexus could continue fighting, picking off Vorthak vessels one by one. But that would take time humanity didn't have, and it would cost lives the species couldn't afford to lose. Instead, she activated the Nexus drive's most dangerous capability. The quantum field that surrounded the ship began expanding, creating a probability wave that would engulf the entire Vorthak fleet. All human vessels, this is Nexus Actual, she transmitted. Execute Protocol 7. All ships jump to minimum safe distance immediately. The remaining human vessels throughout the system activated their engines simultaneously, racing away from the expanding quantum field. They understood what Commander Chen was attempting, and they knew she wouldn't survive it. The silent stars. The probability wave reached critical mass just as it encompassed the last Vorthak vessel. For a brief moment, every ship in the Crimson Fleet existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously real and unreal, present and absent, victorious and defeated. Then the wave collapsed, and the Vorthak fleet chose the probability state of never having existed.